Silence can be one of the most misleading signals in any relationship. Most people look at distance and immediately assume the story is over. No message means no interest. No call means no feelings. No effort means no attachment. That conclusion feels logical. It feels obvious. Yet when it comes to avoidant personalities, the truth is often far more complicated. One of the biggest mistakes people make about avoidance is assuming silence means they have forgotten you. In many cases, the exact opposite is happening. Sometimes the more an avoidant pulls away, the more space they create to think about the person they are trying so hard not to think about. That sounds like a contradiction because it is a contradiction. And understanding that contradiction can completely change the way you see their behavior. The reason this topic creates so much confusion is because most people judge feelings through actions. If someone cares, they text. If someone misses you, they call. If someone loves you, they stay close. That is how most relationships work. But avoidant attachment often follows a very different pattern. The closer the connection becomes, the more emotional pressure they feel. The more vulnerable they become, the stronger their urge to create distance. To the outside world, it can look like they are losing interest. Inside their mind, however, a very different battle may be taking place. What many people never learn is that avoidants are often fighting two opposing desires at the same time. One part of them wants connection, closeness, and emotional security. Another part wants independence, control, and protection from vulnerability. These forces constantly pull against each other, creating behavior that seems confusing, inconsistent, and sometimes even cold. Yet beneath that silence, there can be far more reflection than most people realize. In this video, you will learn why avoidants often think about people long after they have pulled away, why distance can sometimes increase emotional reflection instead of reducing it, what psychological conflict is happening inside their minds when they choose silence, why many avoidants struggle to express what they truly feel, and the biggest mistake people make when trying to get closer to them. You will also discover a lesser-known truth that many relationship experts overlook. A truth that explains why an avoidant can miss someone deeply while still doing nothing about it. Most importantly, by the end of this video, you will understand the difference between what an avoidant feels and what an avoidant shows. That distinction changes everything. It can help you stop misreading their actions, stop chasing answers that never come, and start seeing the hidden psychology behind the silence. Stay with us until the end because the final insight may completely change the way you interpret distance, withdrawal, and emotional absence. If you enjoy exploring the deeper psychology of relationships, attachment styles, and human behavior, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join our growing community. Now let's uncover why the more avoidants ignore you, the more they may actually be thinking about you. One of the hardest truths to understand about avoidance is that distance does not always mean detachment. Most people see the two as the same thing. When someone pulls away, becomes less responsive, or creates space, the immediate assumption is that their feelings have faded. It seems like the most logical explanation. After all, when people care deeply, they usually move closer, not further away. They communicate more, not less. They seek connection instead of separation. But avoidant behavior often challenges these expectations. What looks like a loss of interest from the outside can sometimes be a response to emotional overload on the inside. There is a major difference between losing interest and feeling overwhelmed. Losing interest is simple. A person gradually stops caring. Their emotional investment decreases. Their curiosity fades. Their attention shifts elsewhere. Overwhelm is completely different. Overwhelm happens when emotions become so intense that a person struggles to process them. Instead of moving toward the source of those feelings, they move away from it. Not because the feelings are weak, but because they feel too strong. This is where many people misunderstand avoidance. They assume withdrawal means indifference when it can sometimes mean emotional overload. For many avoidants, closeness creates a unique kind of pressure. The deeper the connection becomes, the more vulnerable they feel. The more vulnerable they feel, the more exposed they feel. And the more exposed they feel, the stronger their instinct becomes to regain control. Distance becomes their way of managing emotions that feel difficult to handle. It becomes a coping mechanism, a form of self-protection. While another person might seek comfort through connection, an avoidant often seeks comfort through space. This can create a confusing situation. One day they appear warm, engaged, and emotionally available. The next day they seem distant, distracted, or withdrawn. The change feels sudden, it feels personal. Yet the shift is often connected to what is happening inside them rather than what is happening around them. As feelings grow stronger, their need for emotional safety grows stronger too. They may not fully understand this reaction themselves. They only know that they suddenly need room to breathe. The stronger the emotional pressure becomes, the stronger the urge to create space. That single pattern explains more avoidant behavior than most people realize. Emotional pressure does not always come from conflict. It does not always come from arguments. Sometimes it comes from positive experiences. A deeper conversation, a stronger bond, a moment of genuine intimacy, a future plan, a realization that the relationship is becoming important. These moments create excitement for many people. For avoidance, they can also create anxiety. Part of the reason lies in how avoidants learned to deal with emotions earlier in life. Many developed a habit of relying on themselves rather than depending on others. Independence became safety. Self-sufficiency became comfort. Emotional distance became familiar. As adults, deep connection can activate fears they rarely talk about. Fears of disappointment, fears of dependence, fears of losing control over their own emotional world. These fears often operate beneath the surface, influencing behavior without being fully recognized. As a result, they may create distance, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much. The relationship begins demanding emotional skills they never fully developed. Instead of moving closer to those emotions, they move away from them. It feels safer, it feels familiar, it feels manageable. This leads to another surprising reality. Many avoidants actually think about people more after creating distance. At first glance, this seems impossible. If they are pulling away, shouldn't they be thinking less? Not necessarily. Human psychology has always been influenced by absence. People often gain clarity when immediate pressure is removed. Space changes perspective. It creates room for reflection. When an avoidant is deeply involved in a relationship, several emotional forces become active at the same time. Fear increases, vulnerability increases, expectations increase. Every conversation carries emotional weight. Every interaction feels significant. Every decision feels connected to the future. Even positive experiences can feel overwhelming because they increase the importance of the relationship. The relationship starts asking questions they may not feel ready to answer. How serious is this becoming? What if I get hurt? What if I lose my independence? What if I cannot meet expectations? What if I disappoint this person? These questions create emotional noise. They create internal tension. And that tension can make it difficult to fully appreciate what the relationship means. Then distance appears. The immediate pressure begins to fade. The expectations become quieter. The emotional intensity decreases. Anxiety loses some of its power. And when anxiety decreases, reflection begins. Without the constant pressure of closeness, avoidants often gain access to feelings that were previously buried beneath stress. They begin noticing the absence. They begin remembering conversations. They begin replaying memories. They start recognizing the emotional value of what they had. Ironically, the very distance that seems to separate them from someone can create the conditions that make them think about that person more. Sometimes they can finally miss you only after they've escaped the pressure of being close to you. This does not happen because distance magically creates love. It happens because distance removes emotional interference. The relationship is no longer demanding immediate action. No difficult conversation is waiting. No expectation needs to be met today. No vulnerability is required in the present moment. Their nervous system relaxes. Their mind becomes quieter. And in that quieter state, feelings often become easier to recognize. This is one reason why avoidance can appear confusing. During periods of closeness, they may seem uncertain. During periods of distance, they may seem more reflective. The timing feels backward to people who do not understand avoidant psychology. Yet for avoidance, it often follows a consistent pattern. Emotional pressure pushes them away. Emotional space allows them to process. Of course, this process creates an internal struggle that is rarely visible to anyone else. Most people only see the behavior. They see the silence. They see the withdrawal. They see the lack of communication. What they do not see is the conflict happening beneath the surface. Inside many avoidants exists a constant tug-of-war between two powerful desires. One part wants connection. One part wants comfort. One part wants love. These desires are completely real. Avoidants are not emotionless. They are not incapable of caring. They are not immune to attachment. They want meaningful relationships just like anyone else. They enjoy feeling understood. They appreciate trust. They value companionship. They experience loneliness. They experience longing. They experience loss. Yet another part of them wants freedom. Another part wants independence. Another part wants emotional safety. This side becomes activated whenever closeness feels risky. It sees vulnerability as exposure. It sees dependence as danger. It sees emotional need as a potential threat to stability. While one side moves toward connection, the other side pulls away from it. The result is a push-pull dynamic that often confuses everyone involved. They move closer, then they move away. They open up, then they shut down. They seek connection, then they seek distance. To the outside world, this behavior can seem inconsistent. It can seem contradictory. Yet inside their mind, both sides feel equally important. The desire for love is real. The desire for safety is real. Neither side completely wins. This creates a mental conversation that may continue long after contact has stopped. While another person assumes the avoidant has moved on, the avoidant may still be wrestling with competing emotions. They may still be trying to make sense of what they feel. They may still be evaluating the risks and rewards of connection. They don't stop thinking about you. They start arguing with themselves about you. One voice reminds them of the comfort they felt around you. Another voice reminds them of the vulnerability that comfort required. One voice focuses on the connection. Another focuses on the risk. One voice wants to reach out. Another wants to stay protected. This internal debate can continue for weeks, months, or even longer. It often remains invisible because avoidants rarely discuss it openly. Their silence creates the impression that nothing is happening. In reality, their mind may be far more active than anyone realizes. That leads to one of the biggest questions people ask. If avoidants think about someone so much, why don't they simply say it? The answer is deeply connected to how they experience vulnerability. For many avoidants, expressing emotional needs feels uncomfortable. It feels risky. It feels exposing. Admitting that they miss someone requires revealing an emotional truth. It requires lowering defenses. It requires accepting uncertainty. Once those feelings are spoken aloud, they become real. They become visible. And visibility can feel dangerous. Fear of vulnerability plays a major role. Fear of rejection plays a major role. Fear of losing control plays a major role. These fears do not always appear as conscious thoughts. Sometimes they operate automatically. An avoidant may want to send a message but hesitate. They may want to reconnect but delay. They may want to express affection but remain silent. The emotional desire exists, but the protective instincts are stronger. Many avoidants spend years building an identity around self-reliance. They learn to manage problems alone. They learn to hide emotional needs. They learn to depend on themselves rather than others. This strategy may protect them from disappointment, but it also makes emotional openness feel unfamiliar. As a result, expressing simple feelings can feel surprisingly difficult. Telling someone "I miss you" sounds easy in theory. For an avoidant, it can feel like exposing a weakness. It can feel like surrendering control. It can feel like risking rejection. It can feel like creating expectations they are not sure they can meet. The words themselves are not the problem. The vulnerability behind the words is the problem. That is why many avoidants choose silence, even when emotions remain present. Silence feels safer. Silence protects them from uncertainty. Silence allows them to maintain emotional distance while still holding on to their feelings privately. To an avoidant, saying "I miss you" can feel more dangerous than missing you. And because of that, the people around them often misunderstand what their silence means. They assume silence equals indifference. They assume distance equals detachment. They assume withdrawal equals forgetting. Yet beneath that silence, an entirely different story may be unfolding, one shaped by emotional overwhelm, reflection, internal conflict, and fears that rarely reach the surface. At this point, many people make a mistake that feels completely natural. In fact, it feels so natural that most people never question it. When someone pulls away, the instinct is to move closer. When someone becomes distant, the instinct is to seek answers. When communication decreases, the instinct is to increase communication. Most people believe effort solves distance. They believe more attention will repair disconnection. They believe persistence proves love. While those ideas may work in some situations, they often create the exact opposite effect with avoidance. This is where many relationships enter a painful cycle. The avoidant creates space because they feel overwhelmed. The other person notices the distance and becomes anxious. That anxiety creates a desire for reassurance. The desire for reassurance leads to more messages, more questions, more attempts to reconnect, more efforts to pull the avoidant closer. From the perspective of the person doing the chasing, these actions make perfect sense. They are trying to save the connection. They are trying to restore closeness. They are trying to understand what changed. They are trying to feel secure again. But from the perspective of the avoidant, the experience can feel very different. Every additional message can feel like more pressure. Every demand for answers can feel like more responsibility. Every attempt to force a conversation can feel like more emotional weight. What started as a need for temporary space suddenly becomes a need for even more space. The more you try to pull them closer, the more they feel the need to protect their space. This pattern appears again and again in avoidant relationships. One person responds to distance by pursuing. The other responds to pursuit by distancing further. Neither person is necessarily trying to hurt the other. Both are reacting to their own fears. One fears abandonment. The other fears emotional overwhelm. The tragedy is that both people often believe they are solving the problem while accidentally making it worse. The person chasing thinks, if I show them how much I care, they will come back. The avoidant thinks, if I do not create more space, I will lose my ability to breathe. Neither side fully understands what the other is experiencing. This misunderstanding creates frustration. The more the pursuer reaches out, the more ignored they feel. The more the avoidant withdraws, the more trapped they feel. Eventually, both people become exhausted. One of the biggest misconceptions about avoidance is the belief that pressure creates clarity. Many people assume that if they ask enough questions, send enough messages, or express enough emotions, the avoidant will finally open up. Sometimes the opposite happens. Increased pressure often pushes avoidants deeper into their protective habits. This does not mean avoidants are always right. It does not mean their behavior is healthy. It does not mean communication should disappear. It simply means that pressure rarely produces the outcome people hope for. An avoidant who already feels emotionally overwhelmed is unlikely to become more emotionally available, because additional pressure is added to the situation. Instead, they often focus on protecting their emotional boundaries. That protection can look like silence. It can look like avoidance. It can look like delayed responses. It can look like emotional distance. To the person on the receiving end, these behaviors feel cold. To the avoidant, they often feel necessary. The important thing to understand is that emotional pressure changes how avoidants process relationships. The more pressure they feel, the more their attention shifts away from connection and towards self-protection. Their energy becomes focused on escaping discomfort rather than exploring feelings. This is why many people never see the result expect from chasing. They think they are moving closer. The avoidant experiences it as being pushed. They think they are creating connection. The avoidant experiences it as losing freedom. They think they are fighting for the relationship. The avoidant experiences it as fighting for space. As strange as it sounds, one of the most powerful things a person can do in these situations is stop trying to control the outcome. That does not mean becoming indifferent. It does not mean pretending not to care. It means allowing enough room for both people to think clearly. Because clarity rarely grows in an atmosphere of pressure. Clarity often grows in an atmosphere of space, and that leads to another surprising truth about avoidance. Many people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to make an avoidant think about them more. They search for perfect messages. They look for strategies. They analyze every interaction. They wonder what words will create attraction, what actions will trigger curiosity, and what behaviors will make the avoidant come back. Yet the qualities that often leave the strongest impression are usually much simpler: self-respect, emotional stability, independence, the absence of pressure. These qualities create a very different experience for the avoidant. Instead of feeling pursued, they feel free to think. Instead of feeling pushed toward a decision, they feel free to reflect. Instead of reacting to pressure, they gain room to process their own emotions. Healthy distance is often misunderstood because many people associate distance with loss. They assume that space automatically weakens connection. In reality, healthy distance can sometimes strengthen awareness. It removes distractions. It removes immediate emotional tension. It allows thoughts and feelings to surface naturally. When someone constantly occupies your attention, reflection becomes difficult. When someone constantly demands answers, reflection becomes difficult. When someone constantly seeks reassurance, reflection becomes difficult. The mind becomes focused on managing pressure rather than understanding emotions. But when healthy space exists, something changes. The relationship is no longer demanding immediate action. The emotional noise becomes quieter. The mind gains room to observe what is actually being felt. This is where many avoidants begin thinking more deeply about the people who matter to them. Not because anyone manipulated them, not because anyone played games, not because anyone followed a secret strategy, because space created the opportunity for reflection. This is not manipulation. This is understanding how attachment psychology works. That distinction matters. Manipulation attempts to control another person's emotions. Understanding psychology helps explain why certain patterns occur. The goal should never be to force an avoidant into missing you. The goal should never be to manufacture emotional reactions. The goal should never be to create artificial distance in hopes of producing a specific result. Healthy distance is not about making someone suffer. Healthy distance is about allowing both people to reconnect with themselves. When that happens, avoidants often gain a clearer view of their emotions. Without constant pressure, they begin remembering details. They begin replaying conversations. They begin noticing absences. They begin recognizing what certain people contributed to their lives: the comfort, the support, the companionship, the understanding. Many avoidants are surprisingly reflective once the pressure of immediate interaction disappears. The challenge is that this reflection often happens privately. It happens internally. It happens in silence. The people waiting for obvious signs may never see the process taking place. And this is where an important reality must be faced. Many viewers may find this next part uncomfortable. It challenges one of the most common assumptions people make about avoidance. An avoidant thinking about you is not the same as an avoidant returning. Those are two completely different things. An avoidant may think about you often. They may miss you deeply. They may replay memories. They may wonder how you are doing. They may feel sadness over what happened. They may even regret certain decisions. None of those feelings automatically create action. This is one of the most overlooked truths in relationship psychology. People often assume feelings naturally lead to behavior. In reality, there is a gap between what people feel and what they do. That gap can be especially large for avoidance. Missing you does not guarantee action. Thoughts do not equal commitment. Feelings do not equal readiness. These distinctions are important because they protect people from false hope. Many individuals spend months interpreting signs: a random message, a social media view, a brief interaction, a delayed reaction. They assume these behaviors prove a reunion is coming. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do not. The reality is that an avoidant can care deeply and still remain distant. They can think about someone every day and still avoid reaching out. They can miss a relationship and still feel unprepared to return to it. They can recognize someone's value and still struggle to overcome their own fears. Human emotions are rarely as simple as people want them to be. A person can love and hesitate. A person can care and withdraw. A person can miss someone and remain silent. This does not only happen with avoidance, but avoidants often experience these contradictions more intensely because emotional vulnerability creates such strong internal conflict. That is why it is important to separate emotional reality from wishful thinking. Many people focus only on the first part of the story. They focus on whether the avoidant misses them, whether the avoidant thinks about them, whether the avoidant still cares. Those questions matter, but they are not the whole story. The more important question is whether the avoidant is emotionally ready to act on those feelings, because awareness and action are not the same thing. Ramification and commitment are not the same thing. Longing and readiness are not the same thing. A person can spend months reflecting on a relationship and still feel unable to re-enter it. A person can recognize what they lost and still lack the emotional tools needed to rebuild it. This is why understanding avoidance requires patience and realism at the same time. Patience helps you understand what may be happening beneath the surface. Realism helps you avoid creating expectations that emotions alone cannot fulfill. The truth is that many avoidants spend significant time thinking about people they no longer speak to. They revisit memories, they reconsider decisions, they analyze relationships long after others assume they have moved on. But whether those thoughts become meaningful action depends on something much deeper than feelings alone. It depends on emotional growth, self-awareness, readiness for vulnerability, and the willingness to face the fears that created distance in the first place. And for many avoidants, that journey takes far longer than most people expect. So what is the real lesson here? Avoidants often distance themselves when emotions become overwhelming. What looks like rejection is not always rejection. What looks like indifference is not always indifference. Sometimes silence is not the absence of feelings. Sometimes it is the result of feelings that are too difficult to process. Throughout this video, we've seen that distance can create reflection. We've seen that an avoidance behavior and an avoidance emotions are not always moving in the same direction. And perhaps most importantly, we've learned that missing someone and contacting them are not the same thing. A person can think about you, care about you, and even miss you deeply while still struggling to overcome the fears that keep them silent. That is why understanding avoidance requires more than looking at their actions alone. It requires understanding the hidden conflict taking place beneath the surface. The conflict between connection and protection, between vulnerability and safety, between wanting love and fearing what love demands. Sometimes the person who seems the furthest away is fighting the hardest battle inside. Not because they've forgotten you, but because remembering you forces them to feel everything they've spent years trying to avoid. And perhaps that is the most painful truth of all. The people who appear the coldest are not always the ones who feel the least. Sometimes they are the ones working the hardest to keep those feelings under control. While everyone else sees silence, they are carrying conversations inside their own mind. While everyone else sees distance, they are wrestling with emotions they don't fully understand themselves. So before you assume silence tells the whole story, remember this. Human behavior is often far more complicated than it appears. Some people express their feelings openly. Others hide them behind walls built long ago. And the stronger those walls are, the harder it becomes to know what is truly happening behind them. If this video gave you a new perspective on avoidant behavior, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep insights into relationships, attachment styles, psychology, and human behavior. And if you found value in what you learned today, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who may be struggling to understand an avoidant in their life. Also, let us know in the comments. Do you think an avoidant can genuinely miss someone without reaching out, or do actions always matter more than feelings? Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep looking beyond the surface, because the deepest truths are often hidden in the places most people never think to look.